in Utah, you have the 15 elected members of the State Board of Education, and we have a very woke board. We have, in the terrible irony of it is so many of them are running underneath the Republican, supposedly the conservative banner, being pro-family, pro-freedom, pro-faith. But the votes do not align with those values. And so our board, we are electing Republicans who are either getting co-opted by the system, which is usually kind of what happens. People go in there with super good intentions, like, oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fight for all the good things. But what happens is what we kind of call a sizing up process, and really everybody who ends up getting in these elected positions, who gets elected, they're getting measured for their coffins essentially by the administrative state, the bureaucrats who've been there forever, right? The bureaucracy stays while the elected members come and go. And so these guys have their agendas down. They don't need people like Natalie Cline coming in and rocking the boat and stirring the pot, because that interferes with their goals, their social change agendas, the things they've been trained to do, right? Professionally, educationally. And so you see a lot of that sizing up of the board members. There were
before they even get on the board.
Before they even get on, there were email communications about Natalie Cline before she had been elected, but before she had stepped foot in that great and spacious building, which is the State Board of Education. They had already taken measure of her and said, she's one we're going to have to control, rein in. And you could see how that happened, I mean, through the course of her tenure on the board. So this is the hazard, this is the pit that a lot of these incoming members will find themselves in, because everybody wants to, there's this tendency of humans to want to fit into their surroundings, right? Nobody wants to stick out like a sore thumb. Nobody wants to feel like the loner, the lone wolf in a pack, and yet
no one wants to be bludgeoned or attacked, right?
Right.
Or publicly humiliated.
Yes, yes. And so what happens is they want you to kind of associate pleasure with fitting in and pain with sticking out. This is the conformity function that is very strong across educational circles, not just on a board for education. It happens in classrooms every day. And this is where good people get tripped up. So, you know, they'll have maybe one foot in the coffin and one foot outside of the coffin, right? And they're like, well, you know, they haven't exactly like put me in there, but they're not exactly out of there either. So they're kind of stuck, and they end up just kind of going with the flow. The documents that come to the board members, they meet every month, and it's for 2 days, but most of the activity, the action that they take takes place on the first day. Sometimes they make that coffin so cozy. There's a lot of, like I mentioned before, pain associated with sticking out. You saw that with Natalie Cline. What's funny is they started kind of putting her through the media ringer immediately, not for her actions on the board, not for her votes, because her votes didn't really start, you know, kind of rocking the boat until a little bit later as she was getting her footing at the board. But it didn't matter. It was for what she was posting on her personal Facebook page that they were going after her for. And so this is it for people who are outspoken against the agenda. They're the ones who need to be silenced first. They need to be made an example of. That's Maoist cultural Marxist tactics right there, right? That's the struggle session. That's the public shaming. You can see that all these Marxist tactics are alive and well in practice in terms of their approaches. And this is where people have to navigate very carefully. Like if you just want to go in there and start no voting, do it. But watch what happens when you do, because they will come at you and they'll try to kind of sweet talk you first, and maybe give you a little bit of a guilt trip. We've seen that happen with other board members. In fact, there's a board member in leadership right now who got a very emotionally manipulative email from the state superintendent back in, I believe it was 2021, about coming out against critical race theory. And this superintendent basically gave her the smackdown in an email, but did it in a very emotionally manipulative way, invoked the name of her religion, of her, her prophet in the church, all sorts of interesting emotional manipulation tactics to get her to not come out so strongly against the DEI rule that the board was passing at the time. And it must have worked because she voted for it.